Live from Mangaung in the Free State, good evening and welcome to this daily update brought to you by SABC News. Every day until Thursday, we're giving you these daily updates, looking back at the day, how it all went, and bringing you the latest. And tonight, we are talking about the events that took place from the morning, nominations. You've heard about them. You've heard about who has withdrawn and who's still in the race, who is contesting what positions and no longer interested in what position. We bring you all of that. And of course, analysis from our members of our panel of experts. We have tonight Professor Susan Boyson. We also have Professor Siepe as well. They will be analyzing today's events and the implications that they have, not only on this Congress, but also on you as a South African. Well, let's start with the nominations. So far, it's been a grueling 2 days, as I'm sure you will have heard, but the big story of the day, of course, being the withdrawal of Kgalema Motlanthe from the post the post that he was nominated for, which is the deputy presidency of the ANC. He is, however, taking Jacob Zuma on the position of party president. Both have accepted nominations here at this elective conference. Motlanthe has, however, as I said, withdrawn from contesting the position of deputy president, and Ace Magashule has also withdrawn his candidature for the position of national chairperson, supporting Baleka Mbete. She will, of course, be up against Thandi Modise.
Day 2 of the conference is down to business. Following the adoption of the credentials and amendments to the party's constitution, it was time for nominations. Rules laid out, and it's crunch time. The party's top two will battle it out.
Candidate for the position of the president is Motlanthe Kgalema. The second candidate for the position of president is Zuma Jacob.
President Jacob Zuma enters the race with more provincial and league nominations over his deputy Kgalema Motlanthe. Deputy President Motlanthe withdrew from the deputy post, paving the way for a three-horse race.
For the deputy president, it is Phosa Matthews, Ramaphosa Cyril, Sekhuale Tokyo.
Gwede Mantashe and Fikile Mbalula are eyeing the post of Secretary General. Analysts say contestation in the ANC is not a bad thing, as it entrenches internal democratic culture.
It's good that the ANC goes through this democratic process of contesting for positions. The idea of somebody anointing somebody to be a president, as it happened in 1997, is not a good way of dealing with the issue of transition and democratization of society.
The delegates will have a final say on who makes it to the party's top 6 on a secret ballot. Results are expected tomorrow, ending months of speculation, lobbying and campaigning. Mzwandile Mbeje, SABC News, Mangaung.
Meanwhile, the ANC's head of campaigns, Fikile Mbalula, says it's unfortunate that the focus of this conference has in fact been on the election.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that the leadership issue has been elevated as a do or die in Mangaung. Of course, not unexpected, because any contest for the ANC will signal either a view in the country that will say it's a disaster, or either it stands for progress. So in this particular instance, society has been abuzz across, all sectors about the expectation on this particular Congress. And I hope we, who are delegates in this Congress, do not fail society by simply thinking that the alpha and omega of the Congress is the leadership. We still have got a duty and a responsibility. Speaking to the theme of this Congress, unity in action for socio-economic freedom. That speaks to the heart of what confronts South Africa today in the context of the new phase of the national democratic struggle.
Well, Mbalula also lamented the tendency within the ANC that those who lose in elections then tend to be marginalized afterwards.
It depends on the maturity of those who win. But the ANC belongs to all of us. It doesn't belong to anyone who wins a conference. Win or lose, one thing that can never be taken away from you is your membership. So if you've got an inferiority complex and a political complex, so to say, about standing, you will think that the question of standing and losing is a do or die. It is unfortunate that other people define it like that, but for me personally, who's involved in the process, I still understand that the sun will rise from the east tomorrow morning, and nothing will have actually changed.
Well, the question many people will be asking is whether, in fact here right now, is whether the ANC, this ANC conference, will be interdicted, which will be the first time in the organization's 100-year history. That, of course, comes out of a situation where the conference has ruled that the Northwest and the Free State members will be allowed to vote, but Northwest delegates could challenge this in court. Tomorrow, of course, the Constitutional Court will also be giving reasons as to why it declared that Free State, that Paris Free State conference illegal.
A conference mired in controversy, fierce divisions, which could well spill over into the courts. The ANC is at pains to avoid a legal standoff. It's even contemplating amending its constitution. Earlier, disgruntled groups from both provinces accused the conference of being in contempt of court and have threatened to interdict the conference. But credentials were finally accepted, allowing for nominations to get underway. Those inside the closed plenary say it was a 3-hour battle. At one stage, the Northwest and Free State delegates were asked to leave the debate, but they were later called back in. But clearly some delegates were upset.
We can't nominate from the floor. Based on what? When we're dealing with credentials, there were amendments in credentials. And those comrades that were removed from the credentials, they're still inside here. And therefore, you can't continue with nomination on the floor if those delegates who are supposed to be removed, they're still inside the hall.
The Constitutional Court ruling may well have a serious bearing on this conference. Written judgment will be delivered tomorrow.
I believe that it will be quite incumbent upon them, and I think it will be useful upon them to try to wait for the final written judgment on this case, because I believe that the final judgment might clarify the separation between the branch delegation and the PEC. But the judgment we know thus far, it has been very clear about the PEC. But what seems to be not so clear is the position of the branches that are coming from the Free State province.
The disgruntled members remain unfazed.
We are consulting amongst ourselves as applicants. We are also consulting with Northwest applicants, our lawyers, and we would definitely give what will be our next course of action tomorrow at Constitutional Court.
There's been concern about the veracity of some delegates. The ANC has agreed that the elected Free State PEC will not participate, but it's given the green light to Northwest and Free State delegates to vote. If the conference is interdicted, it will effectively postpone proceedings, and all policy decisions will be rendered null and void. Yolisa Njamela, SABC News, Mangaung.
Well, as the leadership battles get underway at the Mangaung conference, so does the policy formulation challenges beckon. For the next 2 days, delegates at the conference are expected to wrestle with issues of policy, many of which are, of course, carry over from the policy conference that was held in Midrand in June. Such outcomes will, of course, define the nature of the ANC as it begins life after 100 years.
Members of the ANC converged at Mangaung on the third day of what has been dubbed ANC's Watershed Conference. Days leading to the conference, only the leadership race dominated headlines. But for this lot, there is more to the deliberations of the days ahead. The conference was urged to tackle the scourge of ill-discipline.
For me as a young person, I think one of the key things is discipline. We have seen over the 18 months to now, to conference, that there's been a serious lack of discipline amongst our young people, especially our leaders of the ANC Youth League.
Another talking point is expected to be the type of cadre needed by the movement.
We must emphasize more on few aspects. One, issues of discipline, issues of membership management, but issues of political education in the ANC, because if we fail to address those things, we are now changing our character as the organization.
On Sunday, President Jacob Zuma warned of foreign tendencies in the movement. In days leading to conference, a regional secretary in the Northwest, David Chika, was killed, whilst the provincial secretary, Kabelo Matabu, escaped an assassination attempt.
We agree with the president. These emerging tendencies need to be condemned in the strongest possible manner, that we should not use violence to resolve our political differences. We agree wholeheartedly with what the president is saying, that this tendency that is emerging in the province must be confronted, must be dealt with, but also we must encourage our members to have political tolerance, to tolerate each other's views.
But the issue of the empowerment of women seems to resonate with most delegates, and they call for the ANC to discuss how they can meaningfully participate in the economy.
I still believe that women should be empowered economically. As you know, you empower women, you empower a nation. And if we are the people that are leading in the economy, you can rest assured that we can build the economy of this country, and we can also deal with issues of poverty elevation.
Our province is very rich in terms of minerals, in particular platinum. And by the way, it's not only platinum, there are other minerals there. But when you talk of South Africa internationally, they'll tell you that South Africa is rich in minerals. They are referring to the Northwest province, but there's no role played by women.
Delegates will on Tuesday break into 16 commissions to effectively decide on the future of not only the ANC, but the entire country. Tsolofelo Matibedi, SABC News, Mangaung.
The ANC Youth League today distanced itself from a letter purportedly written by Julius Malema. The co-authors are suspended Youth League Secretary General Cindy Somagaqa and spokesperson Floyd Shivambu. They want the National Conference to reverse a decision to expel Malema and suspend the other two. Julius Malema was expelled from the ANC in April. The party's disciplinary appeals committee found that he had brought the ANC into disrepute and that he sowed divisions within party ranks. A final appeal can only be lodged at the party's national conference, which is where we are, and it's because this conference is, of course, the highest decision-making body of the ANC. But the League has, in fact, distanced itself from that letter. Youth League acting president Lamola, speaking on Morning Live this morning, said he has not seen the letter. However, he says the trio enjoy the confidence of the Youth League.
NC.
No, I'm not familiar with the letter that we have said, but the Youth League always had a resolution that the issue must be raised in Congress. I'm not aware that he has written or Floyd has written a letter. What I'm aware is that the Youth League has got the resolution that the issue delegation of the Youth League or any other member of the ANC must be able to raise the issue. I'm not aware that they've written a letter. But
are you going to raise it?
Yes, the Youth League is indeed going to raise the matter.
From the floor, or how is it going to be raised?
Yeah, that was the intention. But if you're saying there's a letter that has been written, then it changes the whole picture, because it means they feel themselves they can raise the issue and they don't have trust in the leadership of the Youth League that is here, which I think they should have given that space to the current leadership that is in Congress to raise the matter, because that is our commitment.
Yeah. Sorry, point of correction there. I said the trio enjoys. In fact, the acting president of the ANC Youth League said that the trio no longer enjoys the confidence of the Youth League. Moving on, well, Free State police say that the 4 men arrested on suspicion of plotting terror activities cannot be directly linked to the ANC's Mangaung conference. The 4 are expected to appear in court tomorrow. Police are, of course, although remaining tight-lipped about the details of that case.
Bainsvlei, a small holding outside Bloemfontein. Police apparently raided a property here after the arrest of the 4. Earlier today, the newly established Federal Freedom Party claimed 2 of the men arrested are their members. The FFP promotes self-determination of the Afrikaner and Boer people in a confederal political model. Police have described the case as at a sensitive stage with more arrests imminent. Palesa Matsani, SABC News, Bloemfontein.
Well, with me in the studio, I am joined by Professor Susan Boyson as well as Professor Siepe. Good evening to both of you.
Good evening, Boya.
I want us to start with the nominations story that we started with. Interesting that Kgalema Motlanthe has decided to withdraw from the race of party deputy president and to focus on that of the nomination of president. Your take?
Yes, indeed. Overall, I think we need to note that all of the top nominations that were nominated across in more than one category have actually withdrawn. That means it's a much simpler ballot for the top 6, and it can be done in one round of voting. And that was precisely where Kgalema Motlanthe opted to go, I think, for the more glorious one, but almost a guaranteed loss, because by this stage we've got 2 factors to go by in terms of possible outcome, and that is the delegate divisions as they came into the conference and the response from the floor, which was quite overwhelmingly in favor of the Zuma slate people.
Well, and certainly from the noises.
Most definitely, and Polokwane, that was a definite indication. And so Kgalema Motlanthe, we have spoken to delegates, and his supporters have gone quite quiet, but they like to emphasize that their candidate did a more honourable thing, possibly, and we know there are serious divisions within the ANC and the dominant faction is ruling at this conference, but they say that their candidate in due course can possibly say, I did the honourable thing at a time then when many of us reckoned that the movement needs a different style of leadership, that I stood up and I took the risk, possibly sacrificed a guaranteed deputy presidency if I was willing to go on the Zuma slate, and did that. And then, obviously, I think they would be honor lost for Motlanthe if he lost against Zuma. But should he then also have run as deputy president of the ANC, then he would have lost in all likelihood, because there is this very strong thrust for Zuma slate. Ramaphosa is on a Zuma slate. And I think then he would have lost against a good friend, what I believe friend and comrade, and it would have been more embarrassing to lose there. So he's possibly in a cool box for the next few years. Very interesting to see whether a future scenario would be Ramaphosa bringing him in as a future deputy president under him. Much water to be run into the ocean.
Prof, I mean, it would the post of deputy president would not have been attractive in any case, because I mean, if that's what he wanted, then he would have just agreed not to contest the post of president.
I think it's important to indicate that he has had a lot of time to think about this, and the decision to withdraw today is also a consequence of what happened on the floor. When his name was mentioned for the position of the president, there was a bit of support. But when they moved to the deputy president, it was very clear that even his own supporters were not very keen on that.
But so was that not because they knew, in any event, that this is the final slate? In other words, he is not.
The question is that we're dealing with somebody who said, I'm available for the position of the president, I'm available for the position of the deputy president, I'm available for the position of additional member. So a person has made, I mean, Kgalema has always been presented as this thinker who's sober, who's reflective. So the question is, why do you avail yourself to all these positions only to, at the end, to say, I'm not going to take this particular position? But what was clear to me was the fact that on the issue of deputy president, there was not even enthusiasm, even from his own supporters, let alone the Zuma supporters. So he responded to what was very clear, and which becomes unfortunate that sometimes you take the decision before there's been an expression of whether you want it or not want it. So, well, what is good about this is that at least there's contestation on all positions. And one could maybe argue that he probably wanted to see that the ANC must move to where there's contestation, except, of course, with the Jesse Duarte, the position of the Deputy Secretary General, where people withdrew.
his chances.
Sorry, who's talking?
His chances.
Zuma's
Kgalema Motlante's
chances. I think they are really quite dismal by all indications. And he has taken, it's a conscious choice that he's taken. It would be almost a world turnaround by tomorrow morning if he emerges as the winner of that race. Yes, it's a deliberate choice, conscious choice that he took.
What could have been the thinking? What could have been the thinking of the so-called ABZ campaign, knowing fully well that certainly as things stand, everything points to a landslide Zuma victory. So what could have been their thinking? I don't know, a lot of people have been sort of speculated, but from where you see...
No, I think it's not so much, they have failed to strategize properly. And that always happens when your approach to politics is based on disliking somebody or not wanting somebody. You are not able to build an argument of why you want somebody. And with Jacob Zuma, you could go so far. I mean, he has been so much attacked that ultimately you find that you don't have anything. And I think they were not able to even present a credible story in terms of why we want this person to run. The emphasis was more, as you put it, ABZ, anything but Zuma. And that is not the best way in which you want to move. So at the moment is that the miscalculation and the failure to strategize and to win a number of people is what ultimately politics is all about. So they failed. It's not that they had not thought, but I don't think they had managed the process of canvassing and mobilizing forces on their side.
Well, failure to strategize, perhaps, maybe you, I mean, there's a point there, Prof, but the rules of engagement, do they really allow someone who is not an incumbent to actually really run or
yes.
like a race?
Do the rules allow it? The odds are seriously stacked against the non-incumbent, against the challenger. We saw
Which then brings me to my question. What then could a challenger have done differently?
No, we have a history here. In 2007, you had an incumbent. And of course, you could argue that there was an issue of principle of the third term and all that. But you had an incumbent who also had state power. And the Zuma lot at that time was able to mobilize, and they created what ultimately was called a tsunami. So it does happen where a proper mobilization of forces can work in your favor. But of course, as I say, the extraordinary circumstance was that you had a president who wanted to go for a third term.
But is it that simple, bro?
I see a few other twists in there. We know that the ANC took this decision, especially in the aftermath of the Youth League fallout, that it's no premature campaigning. Ill discipline was associated with premature campaigning. And the pro-Motlante's forces of change, they could not really strategize. The odds were seriously stacked. They could be slapped with ill-discipline charges around any possible corner. And President Zuma, okay, he's a master strategist, but he used this very well in this period to do very subtle and not such subtle campaigning. Because we saw that he had, between 2009 even, declared his availability for a second term, way before the ban, the prohibition on campaigning came in. And he was de facto campaigning. He had the state was his stage. By position, he can do many things, and it was very subtly, and very often not so subtly, tied to his campaign. So he had free range to campaign, and the others could not do that.
You don't seem to agree.
Well, I'm not too sure that there was no campaigning. There was campaigning on both sides. The issue is that one group was outsmarted, and you could actually say one was more advantaged. But to say that there was no campaigning, I mean, the whole notion of that we call it ABZ.
But aren't there inherent limitations when you are not an incumbent? One, but two, isn't how much of a contribution did the fact that Jacob Zuma was sort of, I mean, Thabo Mbeki had already, done things to Jacob Zuma, which led to, the supporters of Jacob Zuma, being formed, which led to them strategizing perhaps in ways that they would not have been able to do had he not been dealt unfairly, as he alleged, by Thabo Mbeki. Well, so you didn't have that in this instance.
That's the most obvious. Once there's a contest and it has been declared, people try to make sure that they win. And you cannot enter into a contest and say, no, my hands are tied. You will try all forms. And as Susan put it, you also had a situation where JZ has always been a master strategist in how he campaigns. I mean, the only problem is that some people spend more time campaigning in the media. What he does, he spends most time with the people who count, the branches, and ultimately the branches. And it's not like the other group does not have access to the branches, but it's as early as last year. So now 2 years later, we say there was no campaigning. That, it boggles my mind.
Which brings me to my next question. I think a lot of people undermine or underestimate, I think, Jacob Zuma's ability to strategize. I want to unpack that. What do we mean when we say Jacob Zuma is a strategist or is a master strategist? What exactly does he do that other people seem to be unable to do?
He knows the ANC so well. He knows it inside out. He saw exactly, and he had the help of Gwede Mantashe as Secretary General this time around.
Which Thabo Mbeki didn't have.
He didn't have. Kgalema Motlanthe was working against Mbeki. And they had already so many tried and tested techniques for doing that. They knew how much of the battle is won in which delegates come to this conference, in which branches get accredited, in what memberships get recognized for which provinces. And they could map the whole territory. It's not as if, I never said the other side had no campaigning, but they were absolutely dwarfed by the amount of campaigning that could be done on state platforms and through extensive control of Luthuli House. Desirate now already elected in her position as Deputy Secretary General, she was in charge of the President's office in Luthuli House. She did very good work for the President of the ANC there. She was in control of the branches. She has been with the branches all the time. Like indeed, as Sipho says, President Zuma was with the branches all the time. He was attending funerals and handing out tractors and being nice to people on the ground. Some people say he should have been in the President's office in Pretoria more often, but he knows exactly what would bring him this victory. And we also know that once that starting bell went, 29 September, now it is official campaigning time. The Zuma campaign was already hitting the finishing line and said they were so prepared that the PEC is jumping out of the starting blocks and proclaiming and making sure that people know that there is much control from the provinces down through the regions as to which delegates will in the end come into Mangaung.
Just one point. You know, if there's a boxing and you have people who are going to go into a contest, what they do, they study each other. They study your strength and they say, well, this person is strong here. And then you try to go and find a way in which you can undermine that. If you fail to do that, you end up with a situation where somebody goes simply for the clobbering. But you don't go into a contest without coming up with a plan.
You think the ABZ campaign is guilty of that?
No, they actually failed. I mean, the fact that what Susan says are things that were very obvious. The incumbents have these advantages. But what you do, you say, but now, what is it that I should do to be able to make sure that I weaken that or I amplify my own strength? That is what the game of strategy is all about.
What could they have done? Which, I mean, if you listen to what Professor Boyson says, the Jacob Zuma campaign did, being everywhere. Now, what could someone like Kgalema Motlanthe have done to counter that?
First, both Jacob Zuma and Kgalema had access to the branches. And what you do is what message do you speak. And what JZ has always been talking about, and if you listen to the delegates, it's the issue of discipline. Kgalema's group was associated with a very group that is associated with ill discipline. You saw the Youth League pushing in there. And in the perception of many people within and outside the ANC, they realized that these people are ill-disciplined. And it didn't help that you had a person who ultimately got expelled from the ANC, who was pushing that. Even Kgalema himself did not associate himself with the people who were championing his cause. Remember when Julius Malema was facing the DC, one of the people he had asked to come and speak on his behalf was Kgalema, and he didn't do that. So it creates all sorts of things. So yes, the environment was uneven, but if you choose to go to a context, you go there openly. So I don't think we should have sympathies when I know that I'm going to be clobbered, I make a choice. Do I expose myself to punishment, or do I take my time and retreat, what people call strategic retreat, and come back when I'm ready for a fight?
But could he have, openly associated himself with A. Julius?
No, I mean, the point is that...
And without hurting his chances?
No, the point is that who champions your cause? I mean, it's also part of the strategy. What resources do you bring? So don't bring resources that... and there are people who had raised those issues. And I mean, I listened to some other comrades who were saying of the ANC. Say, you know, when the deputy president says the ANC erred in expelling Kgalema, there was a quick response. Malema. When there was a quick response from Gwede, and you're saying, but the deputy president was there when we charged him. The deputy president was there when the DC went on. And they could not understand why he would actually take that position. And those are some of the things that makes people, even those who want to support you, say, but this is not proper. So I don't think he had marshaled all the forces that could be on his side. And also on the other side, you had Jacob Zuma, who, if you read the media, there was a lot of mud that was thrown at him. Sometimes, if you are going to fight somebody, you take advantage of all that. All it says about strategy is that I maximize the potential to win, and I weaken my opponent. That's how it works. And if you fail, you failed.
Okay, we're going to take a quick commercial break, but after the break, I want us to talk about how Gwede Mantashe really boosted Jacob Zuma's campaign in ways that I think no other Secretary General of the ANC has done before. That's after the break. Welcome back. You're watching a live broadcast of, it's an update, it's our daily update of what's happening in Mangaung. We look back at the events of the day, we bring you the news stories of the day, but we also bring you analysis. We go behind the headlines to talk about the meaning of some of the things that we see here. Now, Prof, Gwede Mantashe, the role that he has played in Jacob Zuma's campaign.
Jacob Zuma would not have been sitting in a pound since today had it not been for Kingpin Gwede Mantashe. No wonder people say, Zumantashe, it's really a unit there. And those T-shirts with that slogan really speak the story of the Secretary General so familiar with organizations, so comfortable with dealing with organizations on the ground, and knowing that conference majorities are systematically constructed, and knowing that from day one in that office, it was pivotal the extent to which the branches would be built, which branches are strong, which ones one allows to fade away, which ones in the nick of time one can tell, come in, make sure you organize, that you are legitimately constituted, of course. That on the one level, that is where much of this battle was won. On a second level, it was also in this rough and tumble of the final phases of nomination, where there were so many disputes, where there were parallel branches, hosts of ghost members, and the Secretary General. Lutuli House is a place from where the task teams were set out. In some places, task teams did good work. In some other places, they went very quickly over the problem, and the problem is encapsulated in the conference proceedings. Those were not solved, but they helped build this majority in this conference.
No, I think Susan is correct. I mean, if you also read the resolutions and the statement that was made by the President and also the Gwede, he says the power of the ANC lies with the branches. And who has access to the branches? Gwede Mantashe, that's his responsibility to build those branches. So effectively, if he is a supporter of Jacob Zuma, and in terms also of the slate or otherwise, he would have a far greater influence. But whether he has actually done it, it's something that one does not want to get into, because then Susan could be accused of making a case for those who want to go to the courts. But the long and short of it is that the nature of a Secretary General of the ANC is really to engage with the branches. So these are the advantages that comes with incumbency.
Why is it that, I mean, I've heard people talk about Gwede Mantashe. I've seen people writing about him. And often I get a feeling that they somehow underestimate him. In other words, they don't think of him as this like really sharp person that he is, one, but two, that he is in fact a strategist in his own right. But what is it what is it that that makes people to sort of not think of him as highly as they maybe should?
I think he's a jovial, likable, affectionate person, and people really relate to him. And they probably do not realize that there's continuous strategy unfolding, pouring out of his head. But he does it so seamlessly.
I'm talking about some of the thinking classes, if you like. That sort of, they don't seem to be able to relate to him in a way that, as you correctly point out, that the masses within like ANC ranks in particular sort of are able to relate to him.
I actually think many of them do, the thinking classes see him exactly like that. He's not a simple trade unionist or a person like that. He is so sophisticated. And the circles that I move in certainly see him for everything that he is worth.
Yeah, I mean, he's one of the master organizers of the ANC. If you look at business, they actually lend him an ear. You look at even, he's been going around universities engaging, and I do think they take him actually seriously. What might come out is that he does have a way of also making very strong statements of disapproval. And first about especially the analysts who tend to get it always wrong, and who tend also to be sometimes very partisan. That the analysis is not, actually I was talking to Susan, that people don't look at the situation, the subject, to observe it and then try to make sense. What they do, they enter with an attitude to either support or to denigrate. But somehow these are the things that makes Gwede to be very dismissive. And then you see a lot of responses like that, because in a sense, people don't like to be dismissed. And he does tend to do that, but also out of irritation. But when you sit and you engage him, you actually realize the level of sophistication. And he's also somebody who tells members of the ANC that they must actually go to school. I mean, that he has finished his master's and he still wants to work on his doctorate. But it's more about sharpening his tools of analysis and of engagement.
Now, he is up against Fikile Mbalula.
Yes, yes. Fikile Mbalula probably hopes he had not been there. But again, as part of that honorable thing, I have said I'm going to contest. I'm not going to run away from this contest because I believe in contestation. So Fikile Mbalula is the less favored candidate there. Just to add a little point on Gwede Mantashe, he played a phenomenal role in the ill-disciplined part of the Zuma campaign and helping Zuma act against the youth lead counter-mobilization and positioning ill-discipline as such a predominant dictum in the organization. But both Gwede and President Zuma are now expanding it. And nowadays people are opposing them. Anybody, just about anybody, people who opposes them is called ill-disciplined. So ill-disciplined have become to be used as a campaign tool here. And nowadays counter-revolutionary is added to it. And people, it is not a defense of people taking any case to courts, but a counter-revolutionary is used in that context as well. So ill-disciplined, counter-revolutionary have become an expansive new vocabulary which holds serious implications.
Fikile Mbalula?
No, I think the chances are very slim. And again, Fikile Mbalula is a minister. He has other responsibilities. And Gwede is a full-time general secretary. So he has all the time to be able to organize. But also what Susan is saying about the issue of ill-discipline. But I do not want to assume only that they may have cleverly used it, but it was a concern. It was a concern in the ANC, it was a concern for Kgalema, it was a concern for the former President Thabo Mbeki, it's a concern, and when you listen to the NGC, they made a resolution around it. So you should be saying, maybe Gwede and Jacob Zuma were so smart that they could pull the veterans, they could pull the old guard, they could bring the Women's League and all to say this notion of the insults, which has occurred, it's a concern. But I do get the point that she's making. But I do think that there is no organization that will survive if it does not address the issue of discipline. And if you remember Mandela, even Mandela, the biggest thing that you always talked about within the ANC was both discipline in terms of behavior, but also revolutionary discipline.
Now, 3 candidates up for the position of deputy president.
Yeah, and Cyril Ramaphosa here on the Zuma slate is the obvious candidate. Tokyo Sekwale and Matthew Sposa will be also rans by tomorrow this time. And I think Cyril Ramaphosa does enjoy support across the camps. And it could be interesting that he exited politics in the active mainstream politics in South Africa in the late 1990s when Thabo Mbeki became anointed by Mandela as his successor. And so it could be the time of his return.
What's he bringing to the party, though?
Well, I mean, he brings a lot, but even before you get to that, it is interesting that if you to read the media just after the Marikana, the sense of condemnation and even the analysis that came from some analysts saying he's actually finished. But what it also shows is the sophistication of South Africans, and especially even members of the ANC, that they look at the person in totality, they look at the span of years. So they do not look at one incident and say, oh, we write him off. Even when that issue is also questionable. I mean, the analysis that was given was so flawed. But what is important is Cyril, because of the history of the role that he had played, but also remember he was also a person who was the most effective Secretary General of the ANC post 1994. Actually, the ANC started collapsing during Kgalema's time. I mean, if you remember Kgalema as a General Secretary, the report that he gave in Polokwane was of an organization that was in disarray. So Cyril comes in with that managerial competence.
And Jacob Zuma was his deputy.
And Jacob was his deputy. So, and also the business seems to like, he's also a likable person. So the fact that he may have been given the responsibility of dealing with the charges it's simply one of those coincidences. He was chosen to be the chair long before there was an issue of that we're going to discipline somebody else. So it may have boosted Jacob Zuma and his camp, but Cyril seems to be somebody who's a good cadre, upright, a manager, and as I say, you look at the position as a Secretary General. So he'll actually assist whoever would be leading him.
Now, how does a campaign that seems to be having the odds stacked against them field two candidates in the name of Matthews Posa and Tokyo Sekwale?
Yes, indeed. There was, we all know different provinces came with different preferences. Even Gauteng province wouldn't choose between
the two. But then one would have thought that when they got here and realized that really the situation hasn't changed much from what it was following the nomination process, then couldn't they have sat around the table and like strategized and then maybe said...
They probably knew, even jointly, they are unlikely to win it. So they may as well stay in for the thrill. And I have run for Deputy President of the ANC on their CVs, because I really think they were realistic. They must have been realistic enough to know that there's overwhelming weight for that. We know, of course, when Motlanthe was still in for Deputy Presidency as well, it might have been more of a contestation. It's quite possible that people, if Motlanthe had backed down and not stood against Zuma as President, then things might have gone another way. And it could have remained very strategic for them to stay in and then at the last minute switch their votes to somebody else.
Is it a sign or signal of just how perhaps disorganized the campaign was?
Well, I mean, this is one of those examples that you do not divide the vote, especially when you're weak. So the issue is whether they had not thought it through, or whether personal interest became much bigger and egos, you don't know. But what I also find interesting about the people who are competing for the position of a deputy president is that these are the same people who in the past were almost booted out through accusations that they're trying to plot against, you know. So they were both friends in grief at one stage, and they united in that sense. And they moved out to make themselves good business people. They made money, and then they're coming back. So you could actually say it's almost like going underground into the business world and wanting to come back into politics. But the politics is deep within them, you know.
Treasurer Zweli Mkhize making a very good showing. Obviously, I mean, he's in the right slate as things stand, up against Paul Mashatile.
Yes, I think Zweli has also got it cut out for him. He, by endorsement in nomination from the floor today, he clearly has an upper hand. He, of course, KwaZulu-Natal, that Zulu connection, he has managed to stay on the right side of President Zuma despite a few ups and downs. But he's played his cards well, and he has played a huge role in ensuring that KwaZulu-Natal brings this number of delegates to the conference and made Zuma the candidate to beat with very great difficulty. So he had a huge role of that, and I think is being rewarded, and he's certainly very popular, and he appears very competent in many respects.
Paul Mashatile?
Well, I mean, if you look at the Zuma camp, you see also the kind of weight that they bring. Zweli is a premier who is a heavyweight. I mean, if you listen to the radios and comments, he's actually run that province quite well. I mean, when Mutwali talks about the reduction of HIV/AIDS and all that, he refers to KwaZulu-Natal. I mean, even companies that are willing to pour money is because of the stealing. And when you go back also to you look at, there has been less violence or protest, not so much violence. There's been less protest in that area by members of the ANC. I mean, they've been fighting amongst themselves, but you've not had this widespread protest that you find in Gauteng, that you find in Northwest, that you find. So effectively what you have a person who has a posture of somebody who's very steady. But also people do like a person like him who he has been a finance minister, MEC in what. So he has a lot that he brings, and he can, whether if he had campaigned, he would have brought those together. But again, if Mashatile was on the other side of Jacob Zuma, who could also be saying something. So it's also the slate in which you belong. The other people have long they play the game, as they were up front when others were still thinking about are we going to run or we're not going to run, you know. And as some of the cartoonists have actually put it, that when Cyril was running up there, some people were just considering, and it's not a good way to win a race.
Well, but I mean, Cyril himself was couldn't decide. So if that was a factor, then it should affect him as well.
No. Look, you already had a slate that was already advantaged, that started running much earlier.
So it's really the slate?
Yeah, it's really the slate. Because that's why I'm saying that if Mashatile was on the other side, it could have been very different as well. But what you have an association, but also they seem to have fielded very strong candidates as well. You don't have people who are very weak. I mean, if you take somebody like Jessie Duarte, I mean, I assume that she belongs to the Zuma slate. She comes out unopposed.
Okay, I'm not going to talk about her because her thing is obvious, even though, of course, I mean, being on this on the right slate actually, you know, gives you. But let's talk very briefly about Baleka Mbete versus Thandi Modise.
Yes, indeed. Of course, Thandi Modise comes in with serious political disadvantages because she had been in Northwest politics. And she was one of the women premiers that ANC, she was deployed from Luthuli House as Deputy Secretary General, but still she came in as a dual center of power in Northwest Province, where Supremo Phelo, as the provincial chairperson, he is the political czar in that province.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I want to ask whether, in fact, that wasn't part of the strategy. The fact that she got out of Luthuli House, out of the secretariat, and then like to focus on her role as premier, then in many ways lost, you know, the touch you needed. Which you can only get if you are at Luthuli House, as Gwede was.
Indeed, and simultaneously put her in the lion's den of making her a center of political power in that province, which the provinces absolutely hate because the provincial chairpersons do not become the premiers, and that is what they're all about, and they all happen to be men. But the 50% women quota for the ANC on that level then creates immense problems. And Thandi Modise did some good things, some very good things in the Northwest province, but she just couldn't win because they were in any provincial government there are problems, and the political opponents kept on harping on that, and she was cut off from very important what you said, from a Luthuli House power base. The field was left open for Jessie Duarte and Gwede Mantashe.
Now, look, the bottom line is she availed herself for the position that I'm going to compete with all these odds against me. So the question you must ask is that was it wise? And if you also know who is being fielded to that side. Again, for me, people make a choice whether when they go into a contest, they try to study their strengths and weaknesses. And she says that it could be that the argument is that no, let's at least contest and normalize the notion of contestation with the ANC. Outside that, it makes no sense for me to go to a battle that I'm going to lose.
Now, Fikile Mbalula laments what he says has become sort of practice within the ANC, that when you lose, then you become, are these people going to be irrelevant? In other words, whoever loses tomorrow, are they going to be irrelevant?
There is a chance that they will be, because other people who have brought more of the political goodies in terms of delegate votes to the table will be looking for their rewards. And there's a limited number of high-level, really rewarding positions available. It's probably not the end of the political road for him, like we saw in the Cope dissidents. Many of them were very well forgiven and very well rewarded once they found their way back in the ANC. Well, here is a little section of the ANC probably going to find their way back into mainstream, but with serious competition for their posts.
Yeah. Well, I mean, is there, which brings us to the next question, because a lot of people are speculating that once your Paul Mashatiles and all those people like lose, a purge is what's going to happen next.
Well, I mean, you know, contestation in elections means also a change of guard. I mean, you go to any country, if when Obama took over, he got his own people. You go to the players and all that happens, that the new people. That's why you have elections. It's part of a renewal, and the renewal means that you may remove some people. But the point I want to make is that it is the notion that people were purged is not really supported with facts, because if you look at the number of ministers who were appointed post Polokwane, there were a number of them who were also supporting Mbeki. But you also had people who choose not to be part of that. There was also a language where people remain disgruntled. And if you also look at some people's posture, that they're still fighting the battle of Polokwane, instead of joining forces with those who are saying, here's what's them. So for me, it takes two to tango. And on this point, I do think that there'll be a change of guard, which elections do provide, but there'll also be an attempt to win people to come in, but also people have a responsibility to say, we accept the outcome, but we're still members of the ANC. That's why I think it is correct to say, nobody will take this away from you, but he's also saying, those who win must be magnanimous in victory.
Well, question is, will they? And considering what Gwede Mantashe said in his organizational report yesterday, that when the ANC needs to find a role, needs to find a way of ensuring that people stay within. In other words, people don't get rendered irrelevant. Because remember when he was talking about the slates, he was saying the part of the weakness of the slates is that if you don't, like, you're not part of the slate and you are a capable cadre, then because you are not in the slate, then you... But will they, the question is, once they have, will they be as magnanimous?
Yeah, that is a very big question. You know, there is a question of strategy too. There was a bigger threat in Mbeki days with a COPE threatening pending there that people could be pushed out altogether. And it was very much a part of big Zuma's strategy to keep those Mbekians on board, to stop them in their tracks from going out and joining COPE. So that was pure strategy. And in this case, it is very magnanimous, yes. It's very easy to be magnanimous at this stage once you've had that overwhelming campaign and have ensured that you win, have almost humiliated those who dared to oppose, who wanted to exercise a right to contest, who didn't see this elective conference as an anointment conference. And to contest, there's nothing wrong with people staying on the slate and seeing it through. I think it's an honourable thing, once you made yourself available as a candidate, to remain a candidate and not to say, okay, I see the tide is turning against me, I withdraw. And so I think there will be magnanimity, and it is easier to do that in victory. And yeah, but still, new competition for posts will be there.
Yes, because, I mean, won't there be a demand from the people who would have worked hard for Jacob Zuma, Gwede Mantashe, and so on to be elected? Won't there be pressure from those people to say, you need to reward the people who worked hard on?
Yeah, but that is true all the time. If the other side had won, what I'm saying that we should not be too worried that you have new people coming in. That's how the politics work. So this notion of politics that as if people here are going to be different, we must actually take it out. There have been politicians all over the world who have been magnanimous in victory and have invited people who had lost. I mean, if you take Abraham Lincoln, I mean, his leadership was called leadership of team of rivals, where he invited people who competed with him to say, I want you guys in here because you have something to offer, so that there's a universe of ideas on my table. So it depends on the leader, the ones who wins. But the ANC has seen that as a problem, and they are actually putting on the table that we need to make the organization stronger, and it will be stronger if they make sure that they use the best talent from whichever side, from whichever branch that is available within the ANC.
Professor Sepe, Professor Poisson, thank you very much for a really interesting discussion. Well, that's where we're going to leave it for tonight. Tomorrow morning, Morning Live, we'll be bringing you the latest. And of course, later in the morning, we do expect the results of that election process. Our midday bulletins, lunch hour bulletins, will be giving you lots more. And of course, at 10 o'clock tomorrow evening, we'll reflect on the days happening. For now, it's a good night.